The United States and Israel bombed Iran this morning. Not a warning strike, not a limited operation on a single facility. A coordinated assault on Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, and Kermanshah simultaneously. Multiple cities, multiple targets. The operation has two names. The Pentagon is calling it Operation Epic Fury. Israel is calling it Operation Roaring Lion. And the man who has run Iran for 35 years is dead. This is not just a war. This is a direct hit on the most fragile silver market in modern history. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, was killed in an Israeli airstrike on his compound in Tehran. Iranian state media confirmed his death. Donald Trump confirmed his death on Truth Social. Iran's government has announced 40 days of mourning. The Iranian defense minister was killed. The commander of the Revolutionary Guard Corps was killed. The secretary of the Iranian Security Council was killed. Iran's entire military command structure has been decapitated in a single morning, and Iran has already fired back. Missiles have struck Israel. 1 person killed in Tel Aviv. 121 injured across the country. Missiles hit the UAE. A strike damaged the Fairmont Hotel on Palm Jumeirah in Dubai. 1 person killed at Zayed International Airport in Abu Dhabi. Iran's drones hit Bahrain, where the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters is located. Kuwait International Airport was struck. Qatar intercepted multiple missile waves. Saudi Arabia confirmed Iranian attacks on Riyadh and its eastern province. The entire Middle East is under fire right now. Dubai International Airport, the world's busiest international airport, has halted all flights indefinitely. And while all of that was happening, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps broadcast a message on maritime radio frequencies to every ship in the region. 5 words. No ship is allowed to pass. The Strait of Hormuz, the 21-mile-wide waterway through which 20% of the world's oil supply moves every single day. Iran told every vessel in the region that the strait is closed. This is the moment that every financial analyst, every central bank, every commodity trader has feared for decades, and it arrived today. Gold is at $5,292 right now. The traditional markets, COMEX, London, every major futures exchange, are closed for the weekend. They do not reopen for hours. But the price you are watching move right now is telling you everything you need to know about what Monday morning looks like. I need to show you something that nobody else is connecting right now. Because there are 100 videos being made this weekend about what this war means for oil and gold. But there is one story underneath all of it that changes the entire picture. And if you do not understand it, you will not understand why this moment is different from every previous Middle East conflict in your lifetime. The war did not arrive in a healthy market. It arrived in a market that was already breaking. Let me show you what I mean. Before the first missile crossed into Iranian airspace this morning, the COMEX silver vault held 86 million registered ounces. That is the physical stockroom of the world's primary silver exchange, the only metal that can legally be delivered against a futures contract. It was draining at 785,000 ounces every single trading day. 750,000 ounces, gone, not replaced, every day. Before the first Iranian missile hit Tel Aviv, the physical silver delivery rate on the COMEX had reached 98%, in a market where 2 to 5% is normal, where 20% has never been seen in recorded history. Institutions were demanding the actual bars at a rate that has no historical parallel. Not paper promises, not cash settlement, the bars. Before Operation Epic Fury began, China had already classified silver as a strategic material and restricted exports to 44 approved companies. The world's largest silver refiner had already decided the metal stays inside China. Before the war, before the missiles, before Khamenei died. Before the strikes began, Mexico, the world's largest silver-producing nation, was already under cartel siege. Transportation of refined silver bars had already been disrupted. The supply pipeline that would normally replenish the COMEX vault was already broken. Before Iran's IRGC told ships to stop transiting the Strait of Hormuz, the January producer price index had already come in at 3.6% annualized on the core reading, almost double the Federal Reserve's target. The Dow had already fallen 728 points on that number alone. The war did not create a crisis. It arrived on top of a crisis that was already in motion. And that distinction matters more than anything else I'm going to tell you in this video. Because every previous Middle East conflict in modern history arrived when the physical silver and gold markets had room to absorb the shock. The vaults were fuller. The supply chains were intact. The inflation baseline was lower. The paper market could manage the fear with margin hikes and administrative tools. There is no room left. There's no escape valve. The vault that should have 300 million ounces has 86 million. The supply pipeline from Mexico and China is already broken. The inflation baseline is already almost double the Fed's target. And now the Strait of Hormuz, the single choke point through which 20% of the world's oil flows, is broadcasting that it is closed. Every previous conflict had a door the paper market could close to keep the physical reality outside. That door just closed from both sides simultaneously. Let me walk you through exactly what happened today so you understand the full picture. The operation began before dawn in Tehran. Explosions across the capital. Smoke rising from districts housing government ministries. The strikes were precise. Each missile sent to a specific address. The compound of Supreme Leader Khamenei, the Defense Ministry, IRGC military bases, missile production facilities, intelligence headquarters. This is the second time in 8 months that the United States has struck Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Operation Midnight Hammer last June took out Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Today's operation went further. This time, the target list included the regime's leadership itself. Trump posted a video at 2:30 in the morning Eastern Time. He said the objectives were to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from Iran, to destroy Iran's missile industry, and to give the Iranian people the opportunity to take their country back. He told the Iranian people directly, "When we are finished, take over your government." Netanyahu called it removing the existential threat posed by the Iranian regime. He said the joint operation will create the conditions for the Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands. This is not a strike designed to degrade capability. It is a strike designed to end a government. Iran understood that immediately. The retaliation was not proportional. It was total. Missiles fired at Israel, at every U.S. military base across the Gulf, at the capital cities of every Arab nation that hosts American forces. The Iranian IRGC told every ship in the region, through a maritime radio broadcast, that the Strait of Hormuz was closed to traffic, the world's most important oil choke point. Closed. Not legally binding under international law, as maritime authorities noted, but already effective in practice. Several oil companies and trading firms paused crude oil shipments through the waterway Saturday. Some tankers are already diverting around the strait at enormous additional cost, and the U.S. Navy's Central Command issued its own advisory, urging all vessels to avoid what it called a maritime warning zone spanning the Gulf of Oman, the North Arabian Sea, and the Strait of Hormuz. Both sides have effectively declared the strait a war zone. Now let me show you what happens to everything you pay for when the Strait of Hormuz becomes a war zone. 20% of the world's daily oil supply moves through that waterway. Not a quarter of U.S. supply, not a fraction of European supply. 20% of everything the entire global economy runs on. Saudi Arabia ships 5.5 million barrels per day through that corridor. Iraq, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar. Every major Gulf producer depends on the strait to get their oil to market. There is no other route that can absorb that volume. The bypassed pipelines that exist can carry roughly 6 million barrels per day combined. The strait carries 20 million. If the strait is disrupted for even a week, oil prices do not climb. They spike. Barclays analysts said this morning that Brent crude could hit $100 per barrel. That is the same level it peaked at during last June's 12-day conflict, when the strait was not disrupted. Today, the strait has already been declared closed. Bob McNally, former White House energy advisor to President George W. Bush, said it directly. A prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz is a guaranteed global recession. Brent crude closed Friday at $72.87. U.S. gasoline averages around $3 per gallon today. Rystad energy analysts say oil could jump $10 to $20 per barrel when markets open Sunday night. If Hormuz disruption proves sustained, Lombard Odier says $100 oil is plausible. At $100 oil, U.S. gasoline prices move to $4.50 or higher. Every product that moves by truck, which is every product you buy, costs more to deliver. Airlines raise ticket prices, manufacturing costs rise, and that feeds into the inflation number that was already running at almost double the Federal Reserve's target. The Fed was already trapped before this morning. Now consider what trapped looks like with $100 oil on top of 3.6% core PPI. The Fed cannot cut rates into an oil-driven inflation spike. If it cuts, the dollar weakens, import prices rise, and inflation goes from almost double target to multiple times target. But it cannot raise rates into a war economy with supply chains disrupting and consumer spending about to crater from $5 gas. It cannot move in either direction without making something catastrophically worse. That paralysis, that complete absence of policy tools to fight the conditions being assembled right now, is historically the single most explosive environment that has ever existed for precious metals. Not bullish, explosive. Let me put a number on what explosive means in historical context. During the 1973 oil embargo, when Arab nations cut supply and oil prices quadrupled, silver went from $2.50 to $6.70. Not the 1980 peak, just the embargo shock alone, a 168% gain in 18 months. Then, in the full stagflation cycle that followed through 1980, silver went to $49.45. From where we are right now, that kind of move puts silver above $150 from a wartime baseline. And that was a crisis that arrived in a market with functioning supply chains, a COMEX vault at full capacity, no China export restrictions, no Mexico cartel disruption, and no 98% physical delivery rate already stripping the vault in real time. We have all of those conditions stacked before the oil shock even begins to be priced in. Now let me tell you where the silver price actually stands right now, because this is important for understanding what Monday looks like. Silver closed Friday around $93. Gold closed Friday around $5,250. The gold-silver ratio sits at approximately 56. That ratio has been compressing for months as silver outperforms gold. In previous major crises, the ratio has compressed to 30 to 20, even lower. At a ratio of 30 against gold at $5,250, silver is $175. At a ratio of 20, silver is $262. Those are not predictions. That is the arithmetic of a ratio compressing toward its historical extremes in a market where the physical supply foundation has already been structurally destroyed before the geopolitical catalyst arrived. Gold's own trajectory tells you what the market thinks is coming. Gold's all-time high was $5,602 on January 28, 2026. It pulled back. It recovered. And tonight, with bombs still falling on Tehran and the Strait of Hormuz declared closed, gold is at $5,292 on markets that are not supposed to be moving. When the traditional exchanges open, every institutional desk, every hedge fund, every central bank trading desk that went home Friday with gold at $5,250 is going to be placing buy orders simultaneously. Not some of them, all of them. They have been sitting at home watching this unfold with no way to trade it for hours. That pent-up demand enters a single opening price. It does not trickle in, it detonates. Now I want to address something directly because I think it is important for how you process everything happening this weekend. This morning changed what the bear case looks like. Before today, the bear argument for silver was reasonable. Maybe the delivery rates normalize. Maybe Mexico stabilizes. Maybe COMEX manages the March delivery cycle with cash settlements. Maybe the paper market finds another way to relieve pressure. Those were real possibilities, imperfect, but real. Here is the honest counterargument that still exists right now. The oil market has been oversupplied heading into this conflict. OPEC Plus has spare production capacity of approximately 4 million barrels per day. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have pipeline capacity to bypass the strait for some volume. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve holds 415 million barrels that the U.S. can release to cushion a supply shock. And the June 2025 Operation Midnight Hammer, the last time the U.S. struck Iranian nuclear sites, produced a 12-day conflict that spiked oil briefly and then settled. Markets recovered quickly when the strait stayed open. Those are real buffers. I'm not dismissing them. But here is the critical difference between June 2025 and today. In June 2025, the IRGC did not broadcast Hormuz closure on maritime frequencies. In June 2025, Khamenei was alive to authorize and manage Iran's response. In June 2025, the COMEX vault held substantially more registered silver than it does right now. In June 2025, Mexico had not yet experienced the cartel leadership vacuum created by El Mencho's killing. In June 2025, China had not yet formally classified silver as a strategic material. In June 2025, the PPI was not already running at almost double the Fed's target before the oil shock began. Each of those differences alone is marginal. Together, they define a fundamentally different market structure. The buffers that worked in June 2025 are smaller today. The vulnerabilities that existed in June 2025 are larger today. And the event today is larger than June 2025 by every measurable dimension. A supreme leader killed, a full military command structure decapitated, a Hormuz broadcast heard by every ship in the region, simultaneous missile strikes across 6 countries. The June 2025 pattern cannot be the reference point for Monday morning. This is a different category of event. Let me be direct about what I think happens from here, not a prediction. 3 honest scenarios with honest probability assessments based on everything I know right now. Scenario 1. The strike achieves its objective faster than anyone expects. Iran's military capacity collapses within 48 to 72 hours. A new Iranian government emerges from the power vacuum that reaches for negotiations. The strait reopens under U.S. naval escort. Oil spikes to $85 to $90 and then retreats as supply continuity is confirmed. In this scenario, gold holds above $5,400 and silver holds above $100. The physical market scarcity remains. The vault does not refill. The structural bid under silver remains, even as the geopolitical premium partially unwinds. This is the floor. And even the floor is a new ceiling compared to everything that existed before this year. Scenario 2. Iran's proxy network activates fully. Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iraqi militias, multiple simultaneous fronts across the region. The strait disruption lasts weeks, not days. Insurance markets refuse to underwrite Hormuz transit. Oil goes to $100, possibly $120. Inflation adds a full percentage point or more globally on top of the 3.6% baseline. The Federal Reserve is paralyzed with no viable policy response. In this scenario, gold moves towards $6,000 and silver moves through $150. The COMEX, already operating with 86 million registered ounces, against delivery demand at 98% rates, faces a physical delivery crisis unlike anything in its history. Paper and physical prices decouple visibly and dramatically. Scenario 3. The leadership vacuum in Tehran produces a power struggle between military factions and reformists. The regime fragments internally. Some IRGC commanders escalate without central authorization. Others stand down. The Strait sees sporadic disruptions rather than a formal closure. Oil oscillates violently between $80 and $110 as markets attempt to price an inherently unpriceable situation. Supply chains reroute at enormous cost but do not fully break. In this scenario, the market lives in maximum uncertainty for weeks or months. And maximum uncertainty in precious metals markets is historically the environment that produces the most violent upside moves. Because every institution that needs to hedge inflation, supply disruption, and geopolitical risk simultaneously reaches for the same two assets, gold and silver. In every scenario, metals are higher than they were on Friday. The only question is how much higher and how fast. Here's what I want you to watch from this point forward. Because the next 72 hours determine which scenario we are in. Watch the Strait of Hormuz, not the diplomatic statements, not the press conferences, the actual shipping data, whether tankers attempt to transit, whether the U.S. Navy begins active escort operations, whether the informal Hormuz closure becomes a formal one enforced by IRGC naval assets. That single signal tells you more about where oil and metals go from here than any other data point on Earth right now. Watch for an Iranian leadership succession. Khamenei had no formally designated successor. The mechanism for selecting a new supreme leader involves the assembly of experts, a clerical body of 88 members. The process is not fast, not transparent, and not guaranteed to produce an outcome that any faction finds acceptable. A leadership vacuum in a nuclear-adjacent state that has just been decapitated militarily is an inherently destabilizing condition. Instability at the top of the Iranian power structure means the military responses from Iran's remaining units become less coordinated, less predictable, and potentially more escalatory. Watch the OPEC Plus meeting scheduled for Sunday. The producer group was already planning to discuss output increases. In the context of a potential Hormuz disruption, their decisions directly affect whether the oil shock is contained or amplifies. Watch the COMEX Vault report every evening at 6 p.m. Eastern when trading resumes. The physical silver drain does not pause for wars. If the drain accelerated over the past week, and the vault has fallen below 86 million ounces before March delivery demand is added, the physical foundation of the paper market is thinner than the already alarming number I have been citing. And watch silver's behavior relative to gold when markets open. If silver outperforms gold in the opening hours, the physical market is signaling that the supply scarcity story is being repriced on top of the geopolitical premium. If gold outperforms silver initially, watch for silver to catch up as the market processes the supply chain implications for an industrial metal that is simultaneously a monetary metal in a supply crisis. Here is what I keep coming back to on March 1st as I look at everything that has happened in the past 24 hours. This is not a war that arrived in a normal market. It arrived in a market where the primary Western silver vault has lost 75% of its inventory in 5 years, where physical delivery demand hit 98% when normal is 2 to 5, where China stopped exporting refined silver before the first missile crossed into Iranian airspace, where Mexico's supply pipeline was disrupted by cartel violence before Operation Epic Fury began, where the inflation baseline was already almost double the central bank's target before oil became a weapon. Every previous geopolitical crisis in the precious metals market arrived with buffer. This one arrived with the buffer already consumed. The door between the old price reality and the new one was already ajar before today. What happened this morning is that someone closed it permanently. From the outside, the market that opens Monday morning is not the same market that closed on Friday. The assumptions that priced silver at $90 and gold at $5,250 were built on a world where the Strait of Hormuz was a threat, not an active war zone, where Iran's leadership was intact and its response calculable, where the inflation shock from an oil disruption was theoretical rather than being layered on top of a 3.6% baseline. None of those assumptions survived the night. Gold at $5,192 right now, on a weekend when the traditional market is closed, is the first vote on what the new assumptions are worth. Every institutional buyer who has been calculating this scenario for months has been waiting for this moment to add to positions they have held through the entire cycle. Monday morning is not a market open. It is a repricing event. And when silver reprices in a market with 86 million ounces of registered inventory against delivery demand running at 98%, while the supply chain from Mexico and China is broken, while oil is spiking through the strait that silver-bearing military hardware was designed to defend, the repricing does not happen gradually. It happens the way everything in this market has happened this year, all at once. If you understood what I just showed you, you're already ahead of 99% of this market. But this is not a one-time event. This is unfolding day by day, number by number, signal by signal. And I track it in real time. So if you want to stay ahead of what's coming next, not after it happens, not when the headlines catch up, but while it's building, subscribe, because the next move in this market won't come with a warning.